it seems today that there are almost an infinite amount of things that you can and maybe should do to try to grow your business, but also grow your career and also grow as a human. And the specific decisions of what you do, who you might hire to help, what books you read, what courses to take, where to even travel, what events to go to, have a pretty significant impact on your trajectory. And I don't have an answer for the best thing, because depending on where you want to end up in your career, that will change. And I think there's also a lot to be said about exploring. And that's a lot of my story. And so I thought what would be fun today would be for me to kind of just tell my story from training clients in the gym to where I am today, to having written a bunch of books, to having built a whole bunch of businesses. Some of them have done quite well. Some of them have done okay. Some of them have not done well. And lived abroad for a long period of time, basically continually working to figure out the way that I want to do life, if that makes sense. And there's no right or wrong answer, again. But the way that I want to do life is not this $100 million, billion-dollar unicorn type business. It's if I can have one or a few businesses that make a few $1,000,000 a year that are pretty chill to run, and at least in the season of my life with a young family, be able to really be with them as much as I want to, never miss a breakfast, never miss a dinner, then I'm really happy about that. And then there's the travel bit as well, which we'll get into. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to tell my story of how that came about. And when Amber are prepared to interrupt me and ask me questions at any point in time, if they see fit.
This is really interesting, because I never knew you wrote a book. So I'm excited to hear about this. This should be informative for me. I've never heard you mention that on the podcast ever.
But it's funny. I don't mention I was looking at how we market stuff through the podcast, and we actually do a really shit job.
Oh, absolutely.
Marketing the things we do through the podcast. We get so wrapped up in talking about whatever we're talking about. I don't think we even do ad spots anymore, do we, Amber? I think we just we didn't talk about it. I think we just kind of stopped that at one point.
No, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I like about this topic, though, is that for people like me and most of the students that we talk to, is that they want to do everything perfectly and plan it out so well so they can execute it and magic happens, right? And so I think that the story is going to be really important, in particular for those of us that think like that, because I think this is actually how the better path versus planning everything to death.
I think this is not just the better path. I think this is the only path. Mm-hmm. I think anybody who tries to plan things to death realizes that even to the best of their abilities, whatever they planned it didn't work out that way. It worked out a completely different way looking backwards. And so there's nothing wrong with building a plan, but you have to be open to perhaps diverting from that plan and knowing when. And that can be hard to figure out. So the particular focus that I'm going to make on this story are basically the books and the people and the mentorships and the events and things like that I encountered or took part of that set me on different trajectories, right? And a lot of this is not necessarily manufacturing it, but recognizing when it's happening and what that's telling you. Because one of the things that I've always thought about a lot is there are certain stories that I hear that for whatever reason, they're sometimes even just asides. There's somebody told me it in passing, or I read about it. It was a tiny little inconsequential story in a book or something like that. And I keep revisiting it. It's oh, why did that happen? What does this mean? And there's two I'll tell you about really, really quick. And I have no idea where I even heard these stories from. I don't even know if these stories are true. But I keep going back to them. So the first one is one of the co-founders of Google. I think it was Eric Schmidt. But as the story goes in my head, again, I have no idea whether this is true or not. As the story goes in my head, one of the early investors in Google. So Google was starting, but it wasn't big yet, right? And one of the early investors said to Eric Schmidt, let's call it, one of the guys, said, hey, you guys have something really great here. It's gaining some traction. you should like tell the world, like, how much money do you need? Like, well, let's advertise. Let's get this out into the world. And he said, you know what? We're getting better every single day. And the people who are finding us now are ready to find us at how good we are at this stage. The people who find us tomorrow, we're going to be a little bit better. The people who find us next month, we're going to be much better, and so on and so on and so on. And so I'm okay with not blasting this into the universe yet, because we're getting better every single day. And that lesson has always stuck with me. I mean, I haven't run a paid advertisement now in over 3 years. And that's not like a business optimization exercise. That's just like, what do you focus on at any one point in time? But what that's led to is we have phenomenal customers who are the right types of customers for us, and we deal with almost no bullshit in our company. Because the people who are ready to find us for the type of work that we do, find us, right? And I mean, look, we market. We market with this podcast, we market with content. But we're not trying to thrust ourselves into new audiences that perhaps aren't ready for you there. And this is like pretty well defined in terms of tech startup type stuff, where you get into early adopters, you get into mid adopters, late adopters. There's a book called Crossing the Chasm if you want to really get into like the different stages of customers, and different customers are ready to find you and your product at different levels of your product or service's maturity. Amber, that book's going to take you like 3 years to read. I don't think you should even. It's dense. Look up like a blog post on it. Like, that's all you need. Like, you don't need to read the ins and outs of it. I know. The only reason that I'm saying this is Amber literally has a Facebook group that's called TBR, which is called To Be Read, which is a support group of people like her who buy piles of books and never finish them.
This is so appropriate.
Hey, I'm getting like 2 chapters a weekend, which is major progress.
It's wonderful. You don't need to. I saw you write down the name of that book the second that I said it. I'm just like,
I
no,
know.
this is bad.
I made a point to show you.
Bad.
At least I can make fun of myself.
I know. So that's the first story, is the Google story. The second story is a story about Conan OBrien, who's one of my favorite comedians, and one of my favorite comedians not just because I think that he's brilliant and clever and fast. He is fast on it, quick-witted. He's great at improv. His podcast is one of the podcasts that I love listening to when I'm just like going for a walk or just need to laugh a little bit. But it's also about like his story and how he overcame a bunch of stuff. But he was, for those of you who don't know the whole story, he was basically kicked off of TV. And so I don't even remember the specifics of how it happened, but contractually, he wasn't allowed to appear on TV. I think it was for 12 months. So once he finished his late show, he just like couldn't contractually appear on TV. And so we decided to do a nationwide comedy tour, like live comedy tour. This is a guy who ran the late night show for like 20 plus years, right? And he put out one tweet, and the tweet said, I had a copy of it for years, but the tweet said something to the tune of, I'm doing a comedy show nationwide. I don't know what I'm doing. It's probably not going to be very good. Here's where you buy tickets. And sold out a nationwide comedy tour in 20 minutes with that one tweet. And I always go back to that story as, this is the level that I want to get at. I don't want to have to sell. It doesn't mean I'm not going to sell. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try to talk about benefits and things like that of doing work with me, but I want my name and my brand and my work to speak for itself to such an extent that there's so much blind trust and faith that people know that anything they ever do with me is going to be done with care, is going to be done carefully, and is going to be done with so much value that you'd be silly to not check it out and take part of it. And that's a lot of work over a lot of years that leads to that. But it's also real work. And I think about that in terms of like short-term video versus writing. I've been thinking about a lot. And when you write, there is a slower uptake in that content. But there's a much more concentrated focus on the content than video. And so there's pros and cons. But knowing that story with Conan OBrien that I keep going back to with that tweet is my ultimate goal, because I keep going back to that story, so it's obviously right for me, helps just keep that in check. Whenever I'm like, oh, maybe I should do video because that person did video and look at how fast their audience is growing. It's like, yeah, but I'm not as good looking as him. But also, I'm not willing to do that type of work. That's not what I think that I'm great at, and that also doesn't align with what I know deep inside of me I really want to do. So I think about those stories a lot. Okay, going back to very, very early on. I don't know how much you don't know or know about me, about my history, but I was, so I graduated, I have a kinesiology degree. I have an honors degree in kinesiology from the University of Western Ontario, which is basically like an Ivy League school in Canada. Like, it's kind of like one of the equivalents. And while I was studying kinesiology, from my second to fourth year while I was studying, I also worked in the campus gym. So I was a personal trainer in the campus gym at the University of Western Ontario. Basically, I became a personal trainer about 1 week after my 18th birthday. So I had a personal training session when I was like 17. And I was like, yo, I could do this. So I looked up how to become certified, figured out I could only become certified when I turned 18, and did it like about a week after my 18th birthday. So by the time I graduated university, well, actually, let's go back to university. So I was working in the university gym, and I would often take the night shift. So I would close the gym at midnight. I don't remember what time I started. I probably did like a 5 or 6 hour shift. But most of what I did was gym monitoring. I did do some personal training of the faculty, of some other students, of people who lived around. But most of what I did then was I monitored the gym. So I basically just like watched bodies move. I chatted with people. Maybe I helped some folks with forums. Sometimes they come up and ask with me. But I would like sit there and I would read Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, like in the gym, watching people. But what would happen at the last, because the gym would get super busy, but at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, all of the PhD students would come in because they were the serious ones who were training. So these were PhDs in nutrition, in muscle physiology and stuff like that. And they would come in, and I would keep the gym open for them a little bit later, a little bit past midnight, and they'd get the workouts in. And I started to be friends with them, and they would often talk about the studies they were doing. Now, Western, Dr. Peter Lemon at Western was one of the leading researchers in creatine as an ergogenic aid, as caffeine as an ergogenic aid, and just down the street, about 45 minutes away, was Dr. Stu Phillips, who was doing a lot of the leading research on hypertrophy. So this little area of Ontario was this like hotbed. And Dr. Stu McGill was also about an hour away. So this little area was just like this hotbed for research for these things. Dr. John Bird, did his PhD at Western University, for example, under Dr. Peter Lemon, funny enough. And so these people would be talking about the research, and it's like, I would keep the gym open for them, and I would just start asking them questions. And then I would be listening to what they would be talking about. And I'd write down notes, and I'd read the studies they were talking about. I'd go home, and I'd go on PubMed, and I'd find the studies, and I'd go back, and I'd ask them questions. And then over time, I started to be able to participate in the conversation a little bit more. And I think a lot of the conversation around, university or wherever you're at, where there are other people, is you have to be an active participant in wherever you go if you really want to benefit from the thing. And I never did that enough with professors, but I think doing that in the gym helped a lot. So I was able to watch a lot of bodies. So by the time that I graduated, I had, 3 years of experience working in the gym. I had this experience with all these like PhD students and stuff like that. And I got a full-time job, personal training, at a small boutique gym in Toronto called Body and Soul Fitness. And that was actually where I trained clients. My entire career was within that facility. They now have 3 locations. They had 1 at the time. I moved to the second location when they opened it, kind of their flagship location, and I became the senior trainer there. But I was training clients day in and day out. I was doing 10, 11, 12 sessions in a day, like one-on-one, pretty reliably. And I remember one of my clients coming in one day. His name was Dr. Tom Unger, and he was the chief, he still is a chief of psychiatry. At that point, I think it was Sunnybrook, that he was the chief of psychiatry at. And we'd always talk. We'd always talk about like entrepreneurial stuff. I don't remember why. Like I wasn't doing anything at the time, but we talk about anything and everything, just like you do with your clients, right? Like I think a lot of people, particularly young personal trainers, downplay just how valuable their clients are to them as they. I still say being a personal trainer when you're young is the single best career you could ever choose in the world. For no other reason than there is no other job when you're in your early 20s and you don't know anything about anything, where the wealthiest, most successful people in your community pay you huge amounts of money to spend time with you multiple times a week and mentor you and work with you, right? And so Tom was one of those to me. So same type of thing. I'd ask about their political, I didn't have opinions, but I'd ask about their political opinions. I'd ask about what was going on in the world. And after about a year of working with him, I worked with him every Tuesday and Thursday at 4:30 p.m. And he'd show up at 4:37, but his session started at 4:30 p.m. And he walked in one day at 4:37 p.m. And he walked over to me on the floor and I said, "What are you doing, idiot? Go get changed." And he took out a book out of his bag and he handed it to me. And he just smiled and he just said, "You are not going to be my personal trainer much longer." And then he went and got changed. And the book that he gave me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, I don't remember whether that book was good or not good or anything about it, but he said, "There's something about you. I don't know what it is, but I can see that you're like you're not going to be training clients. Like you're going to do something, right?" And I wish somebody had given me this book when I was young. That's a mentor. A mentor is somebody who believes in you. And they don't need to do like a lot of things, but they show up when you really need them to show up. And they're in your corner. Right. So he gave me this book and I read it. And then I talked to him. And then I just started going to I went to the library and I just started checking out. Well, actually, I went to the bookstore. And I'd go to the bookstore and I'd look up the best-selling marketing and sales books. And then I'd write down their names and walk across the street to the library and check out the books. And by the way, I still do this. I'm in the library 2-3 days a week. Still to this day. I have 2 books on hold at the library right now that I'm going to pick up tomorrow. I think the library is one of the most amazing, underutilized resources out there. Because you can sample stuff. If it's not for you, totally fine. Give it back. I'll walk the stacks and just anything that looks interesting, I'll pick up. I picked up a fiction book. It was called Dinosaurs by like Lydia something or other. And I read it and it was just like this beautiful, like slow moving fiction book of just this guy who like lived next to this family. Like nothing really happened. It was like one of those books. There was something about it that was just brilliantly written. And there was one line, I collect lines from books. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's like how I try to spice up my writing a lot. And so I have a folder in my notes on my phone that's just called Good Lines. And there's one that I wrote down from that. Where is it? It was really good. Oh, this is one which I like. This is from a different book, but he laughed. It was the laugh human males do to hide emotion. Or
oddly enough, I know what that sound is, so that's accurate.
That's a good line. Everybody knows what that sound. Oh, here, this is what it was. They were describing a character, so the author was describing like a new character that showed up, and the line that she used was, "He was the kind of guy who only likes cheese that comes in single slices." It's like,
what?
Like, I don't know what it is about that, but there's something about that line that's just like, I know exactly who that guy is. But this is what makes writing and stuff interesting, is like, I'll just like I'm just like, ooh, I'm gonna use that somewhere. Or I start in the Obvious Choice book, I start one of the sections, I think, which is having a vision for your business is like reading Twitter all day and then one day figuring out that there's books. And that came from I don't remember what the exact line was, but that came from a science fiction book. It was like, it's like reading Twitter all day and figuring out that, and like realizing that there's books. Anyway. So I just started reading. I mean, I was just reading anything aimlessly about marketing, sales. There was no pressure on it, though. I wasn't trying to get away from anything. There was no rush. I was just gathering knowledge and seeing what stuck about, call it business opportunities now. I wouldn't have called it then. I was just trying to figure out, like, how the world worked outside of my little gym in my little community in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And what I found was that there was a big world out there. And it would have been, I mean, there were multiple stages for me. I studied residential real estate investing for 8 months, thinking that that was what I was going to do. Thinking that I was still going to personal train clients, and with excess cash, I was going to start buying houses and refinance and whatever. There was something about it that just didn't, like, I'm just not enough of a risk taker, basically, for it. I don't want to be leveraged that much for that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think actually if I did it with the house prices as much as they went up, I probably would have done very well. But then I wrote 2 business plans for smoothie operations. I still think it's a good idea. I still think this is a brilliant idea. You can take this. But the idea was, because I worked in the gym, I knew a lot of people. I was like, all right, well, a lot of people are busy. They have money. They don't really have as much health. They don't really know what to eat. What if I worked with a dietitian and I connected with these people and said, hey, for your entire family, we're going to give you like smoothies for the week. And you use, like bubble tea, how they have the sealing things on the cup. So you basically say to them, okay, well, like your 2 kids, like little Timmy and little Joseph or whatever it is. And then you have your husband and then you have you, and you guys all have different needs. Okay, this dietitian is going to meet with you guys, figure out all your needs, figure out all your goals. And we're going to either deliver like a week of smoothies to your house that are sealed for your entire family, for your mornings or whatever it is, or we have pickup stations. And so then you just work with other stores locally with like fridges and pickup stations and things like that. And people can pick them up. I still think that that's kind of a good idea. But anyway, decided not to do it. But then I came across one book called Multiple Streams of Income. And it was written by a guy named Robert G. Allen. I have no idea whether the book is good. This is not me making a recommendation for it. But it was just, again, when you go out to gather information somewhat aimlessly, you get to a point where you've learned so many things about yourself without the pressure of, I need to learn this to do that, to achieve here, to step there. You learn so many things about yourself that eventually it all coalesces in this way where you come across one bit of information, you're like, fuck, that's it. And you recognize it. And I can't, this is like airy-fairy stuff. I can't give you any more than that, other than you know it when it happens. And you recognize it. And so there was a section in this book by Robert G. Allen that talked about something called infopreneuring, which means selling you information on the internet. Crazy idea, right? Nowadays, it's pretty obvious. But this would have been back in 2009, I think it was. And so there were people who were selling information, but like not in your face. Like y'all didn't get 10 Facebook messages a day from people promising you all of the secrets to success. I mean, you had to like know somebody and go out and find it. Anyway, so I come across this thing, and in the book, I still remember the image. I don't know, maybe I'm making it up. Maybe this is in my brain. I haven't looked at that. I still have the book, but I haven't looked at it for like a decade. But I still remember this image, and it was this like sphere image. It was a circle, I guess. Sphere was 3D. But it was this, it wasn't like a kid's 3D book where it like pops out. But it was the circle image, and all around the circle were all of these different income streams that you could generate from information. So it was things like, I don't know, live events, consulting, selling the information itself, building a course. It was all of those types of things. Building an email list, advertising, whatever, right? And then the inside of that, in the sphere of the one thing, was write a book. And the idea behind it was, hey, if you write a book, all of these other opportunities can open up to you based off of this core thing. And that was when I decided to write Ignite the Fire. The book came out when I was 24 years old. And it was such a ridiculous thing for me to do. Like, who the hell was I to write a book for an industry? And I don't think that many industries it would have worked. Like, personal training it's just a young industry, and people in it are often quite young. But even when the book came out, I mean, there was a lot of people who had been in the industry for longer than me who were saying a lot of very negative things about me. I've forgotten more stories probably than I remember. But there was somebody who he hired English students to read through all of his blog posts and my book to try to find out places where I copied him. And I didn't even know who this guy fucking was. But if you, how many things could you possibly talk about in personal training? So, of course there were similarities. I mean, he says here that you should do 3 sets optimally for this thing. That's what you said in your blog post. It's like, yeah, of course. What are you talking? What are we doing here? Anyway, it got really nasty. He sent a lot of very threatening legal notices to the point where I had to get a lawyer involved, and my lawyer basically said, the fact that he hasn't pursued any of this shows me that he basically wants you to just publicly say that you learned everything from him and he is the master, and oh my god, everybody look at him. Basically, it's just like jealousy, and this is him trying to pressure you to say that. So ignore him. And one of two things will happen. One is he's actually going to push legal action, and he has no chance, so it's ridiculous. Or number 2 is he's just going to go away. And number 2 is what happened. I just stopped responding. I just blocked everything in this. But stuff like that happened. And that wasn't the only one. And it sucks when it does. But you grow from it. Right? The only reason, I don't ever talk about that stuff, because it just doesn't matter, because at the time it felt like the walls were closing in, but, so what? So what happened from there? 2012. The book had come out. It was doing fine. I started to reach out to people to syndicate them on the PTDC website, on the PTDC blog. And I was writing on the blog, and I committed to myself that I was going to put a new article on the blog every Tuesday and Thursday. And I was going to send an email at 7 p.m. every single night with a new article every Tuesday and Thursday. And I pretended that people cared about that. And I did it. God, I put myself under pressure to do it. But having those artificial constraints of people are really waiting for this. There's 200 people on the mailing list. Like nobody's waiting for this. Nobody even knows that that's my cadence. But having that force that just, this is what I'm doing, right? A new article every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. I'm going to send an email to the list. It was that's all that I did for the first few years. I shared a link on Facebook or something, I think it was. But in order to accomplish that after a year or so of it, because it is hard, I started looking out at anybody else that was writing for personal trainers. And I started reaching out to them. And, when you reach out to somebody, you can say, oh, I love your work. I'd love to work together. And they're like, okay, where do we go from here? But I started reaching out to them and saying, I love this one article that you wrote for that reason. I have this website. I'd love to take your article, put it on my website. I'm going to give it a new title. you're the author, full like attribution to you, like my name's not anywhere. I'm gonna put it on this website, put it out to our audience. I'm also gonna give you $50. Do I have your permission to do that? Like happy to send it to you before I publish, or I don't have to. Do I have your permission to do that? It's a pretty easy yes. And I said, like, there was a line at the time, you don't actually need to do this anymore, but there was a line that you put in there to make sure that Google knew that this was a syndication, that this wasn't the original. And so there was a line, and you put a link back to the original. Right? And that was assigned to Google to index the original and not index mine. And so basically everybody said yes. And that was how I built a lot of the initial connections and reach to the website. And the reason that I tell you that is, like, everybody right now is in their own silo, I feel, of doing their own work, trying to be like, how can I get famous on the internet? It's like, yeah, there's a lot of other people who are already doing dope shit out there. And I'm not saying don't do dope shit yourself. Like, do it, but you don't need to do as much as you're probably doing. In fact, you would probably do much better if you found other people who were sharing to the same audience and you celebrated them and created a community of them, because I can tell you right now, they're not going to do it. Most people are going to be very insular in their approach. And there is a tremendous amount of benefit being the person who reaches out and brings everybody under one roof and publishes them and talks about them and celebrates them. A wonderful example of this is Andrew Coates. I mean, I can't say enough about the guy. I'm going to speak at his event in Edmonton. I don't speak at events, really, not because I think that I'm like too big of a shot of it. It's just like, I want to be with my family. And if I go speak at an event in Edmonton, that means I'm not with my family for 3 days. But I'm doing it for him. And I'm not asking for any money, because money is not the reason that I do these things. I'm doing it because I want to support him, because I love what he stands for. And I love how he brings people and celebrates other people so much. So look at what Andrew Coates does as a prime example of this. Because he's still doing it, and he's grown this huge platform while training his clients in the gym that's giving him tremendous opportunities outside of his training clients. Business opportunities, promotional opportunities, growth opportunities that most people would die for. And he basically has just done it by just supporting other people, like, to an absurd amount. I'm going to talk about going to Hawaii and stuff, but anything in all of that, guys? That's like the beginning. We'll probably need to do like 2 parts of this.
A few things. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. So the last bit that you're talking about, what I think is really interesting for a lot of people, right, is they feel like they have to be original, right? And so they have to come up with this. I know, but that's the thing, right? And that's what holds everybody back from collaborating, from posting, whatever, is because it's already been said, it's already been done, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point, right? Just like for like the Online Trainer Academy, at its core is a fantastic business course, right? You could apply it to any business. All we've done is looked at it through a different lens, and right, and that's kind of what everybody does, is they just look at it through a slightly different lens, say it a slightly different way, in hopes that it triggers somebody, because the other ways of saying it didn't trigger them before.
Right.
And so you don't have to be the original person. You just have to be the person that says it slightly differently, or that brings in the person that does it, right? And so that need to be original. Yeah.
I agree. The fundamental principles don't change, and they haven't changed, and they won't meaningfully change. There's even if you do stumble upon something unique that's original, it's like, maybe you'll do that once in your life. Well, right. I don't know about you, but content stresses me out, because I feel like I got to produce a whole fuck ton of it, and I don't know that many things. I just don't. And I have a lot of time to read and think and write and talk to interesting people. And I don't know that many things, and I have very little confidence in my ability to learn that many interesting things over the course of my weeks and months. You just can't. You can't try to be original all the time, or come up with new, unique things. It just doesn't matter. You need to communicate the things that do matter in in a way for you people, and then find other people who are also communicating things that matter to them, and like figure out a way to share that meaningfully, right?
I think what I hear is I hear a blueprint, right? Like when I love stories like this because when I'm listening to this type of story, I immediately start to categorize it systematically. And the first thing that I hear with your first two stories is the idea of working patiently, right? The idea of Google saying, we're just going to keep doing the work and we'll get better by just continuing to do the work. And as we get better, better people will find us. But right now, while we're not good, the lower quality people will find us, and they'll be fine with that. We'll grow together. We'll grow at the same place, at the same pace. And even the story with Conan.
It's not lower quality people. I'm going to stop you for 1 second because it's not lower quality people. What it is it's people who have a perhaps more patience, or they're more open to testing it out. Like, some people really love being the type of person who discovers things.
Early adopters.
It's like the early adopters. They're the types of people who, like, they get their jimmies all rustled because they get to say that they discovered this indie band, and then once the indie band gets discovered by other people, they're like, oh, they sold out. It's like,
they're out.
Well, no, they're the same band. You're just not special for knowing about them now.
Right.
But they put up, those same people know that they have to put up with things that are less than perfect.
Right. And they dig it, you know. And even the example with Conan OBrien, right? Him patiently working to the point where his reputation precedes him. You know, those are things that we see students struggle with. Be patiently working to allow yourself to improve your craft. But then the second thing that I hear is the ability to learn without pressure or deadline of learning, right?
Yes.
It's a big part of your story, right? You know, I get to casually integrate myself into these conversations with these PhD students. I get to casually research. I get to have a client give me a book and casually interpret it in the way I don't need to crush this book in a week and come back to him with a full report. I can learn at an enjoyable pace about things that I'm genuinely interested in, and also reject things that I'm not genuinely interested in. And then the third piece for me is interaction with colleagues, right? Just being willing to not have to be the guy, because everybody wants to be the guy, right? And they're limited by their own perception of their ego, right? But if you can set that aside, i.e. in Andrew Coates, and work with people and come to people with something that not only benefits them, but it's on a mission for what you're trying to get accomplished. I talk about this a lot with our online trainer academy students. They say, oh, I can't believe you take this much time with me. And I say, hey, look, I'm on a mission to make sure that people don't lose their moms like I did, that they don't bury their sister and brother like I did. And that mission, I can't go to war myself with the entirety of the opposition. So I'm trying to mobilize an army of great coaches who can get to all the moms and sisters and brothers that I'll never have access to. And I think when you operate from a mission-based approach and you're willing to interact with colleagues who are also on a mission, that's when things start happening. So I'm dissecting everything that you're saying as not an intentionally systematic blueprint, but I see the steps involved and how they would all coalesce. I think it's a great story for so many entrepreneurs that feel like they just got to do everything. Everybody thinks they have to be Michael Jackson. Nobody wants to be Tito, but the Jackson 5 didn't exist without Tito. And it's important. I love the story so far. I can't wait till the travel starts. Are you going to tell the tuk-tuk story again?
Yeah, we can tell the tuk-tuk story. The tuk-tuk story doesn't really have that much to do with my professional thing, but it's just funny because the Filipino prostitute put my hand on her penis. That's the only reason why it's funny.
It's just good podcasting.
I love saying that line and just watching people's response when I say it. They just do a double take. They're just like, oh yeah, no, story, okay, yeah, he was drunk in the Philippines, okay, yeah, that's fine. Wait, what?
Is that in your folder of lines on your phone? You need to add that.
Oh, Tim, did I don't know if you're listening to the same show as me, Tim, but I believe that man just said that she had a penis. Yeah, no, something like that.
It needs to go in your
I'm
folder.
so glad we got a penis reference in this episode. I was concerned we weren't going to hit that benchmark, but
Dangerously close to missing it, Amber. Thank you.
Yeah, it took a little bit long to get
Dangerously
there.
close.
We were being a bit stiff so
But it was
far
always
with the
working.
episode. It was hard. It was
Oh my
hard
gosh.
to ram it in to the, but
I
we
mean,
fit it into
sometimes
the
you
space.
gotta thrust your stories in between commentary, whether it fits or not. You just have to force it.
Sometimes there might be a bit of friction, but over time, that'll
Definitely gonna
Okay.
be chafing involved.
yeah.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
I'm gonna continue a little bit in this episode, and then I think what we'll do is we'll start the travel stuff in the next episode and where that kind of led. But so it's 2012, call it. The PTDC is starting to get a bit of an audience because I'm like syndicating people, and I've been writing now 2 articles a week for a year and a half, and supporting others at the same time. Now I'm doing this while I'm working full time in the gym. Okay, so I'm training 35 to 40 hours one-on-one with clients in the gym. I'm also doing some hiring and like in-service trainings and stuff like that of the trainers, because I'm the senior trainer at the club that I'm at as well. Yo, this was a busy time. This was a busy time in my life. I was getting home at 9:30, 9:45 at night, and Allison would often bring me a sandwich, like, sweetheart. And I would sit down at my computer and I would work on the website until 12, 1, sometimes even 2 in the morning. And I'd get my tired ass up at 5:36 in the morning, and I'd do it all again. And I don't recommend this, I don't not recommend this, but what I have noticed amongst people who have been able to build something is that at a particular point in their life, and it's not even a long period of time often, but there is almost always a period in their life where they were willing to do things that a lot of their contemporaries were not. I would have been 25 years old, 26 years old. I had a girlfriend for part of it. Like, Allison came in and we were obviously girlfriend and boyfriend, but before that I was like single and dating. All of my friends were going out, we're meeting girls, we're having fun. What was I doing? I mean, I was going home at the end of a 12-hour day and I was sitting on my computer to write articles on the internet that really not that many people were reading a lot of the time. And this story just has repeated itself with so many people I've spoken to, that for a very small, when you look back, I mean, I probably did that for about a year, but for a very small, when you look back in the great scheme of things, but enough time that they just work an obscene amount and it's singular focused. And you don't need to do that for very long, but you do need to have some sort of a period where you're willing to do things that other people aren't in order to have things hopefully one day that others don't. And that was that period of my life, was that. I still didn't know what I wanted to sell though. So I had this website, gaining an email list. I had a book, like Ignite the Fire was out. It wasn't making me much money. I mean, it was self-published, but as a personal trainer, it was probably making me $500 extra a month at that point. So like, that's pretty cool. But, I wasn't getting rich. I wasn't like leaving personal training as a result of it. And I started doing a little bit of affiliate promotions. So for those who don't know, an affiliate promotion basically means you advertise something of somebody else's and they give you a percentage of the sales. And so I did some for like fitness equipment. I did some for like fat grips, for example, trigger point performance. But then I did a lot of information affiliate marketing, and something that I thought that would benefit our audience, I would create like basically a promotion for it. And I'd sell the thing for them. You know, maybe it was an ebook, maybe it was an educational. Like I did some stuff for like Eric Cressy and Mike Robertson. I remember doing one with Brett Contreras, and I promoted their thing, and I started making a couple $1,000 here and there promoting things. So that was enough basically to run the website. And it was also enough for me to be able to say, okay, like I think that there's something here. Then I said, I really need to learn about internet marketing. Okay, well, I can try to figure this out on my own. Or I can just market something and figure out while I'm doing it. But I don't want to have to build my own product at the same time as like trying to figure out how to market it. It just seemed too much. And so what I did was I was introduced, and then I found people who basically already had things. And so the first person that I did this with was her name was Kathleen Heffernan, and she's still out there. Kathleen Heffernan, fitness model, bikini model, and she was introduced to me through the guy who built my website. His name was Pat Benetti, and she had a cookbook. She called it the Bikini Model Cookbook. I think she still sells it. And I went and marketed it for her in exchange for a percentage. So in order for me to learn marketing, I was like, well, I can learn marketing from a book or whatever it is, or I can just like market something and learn on the job. So I was reading a ton. I bought programs from a lot of other people to like learn how to do it, but I went with her to, I think it was Lethbridge, Alberta, just outside of Calgary. And I went and we did a film shoot or a photo shoot. I built the landing page. I wrote the copy. I did all the delivery. I formatted the ebook myself, like in like Microsoft Word, like all of this, like everything, step by step by step by step by step. If I didn't know something, I Googled it. It was the same with the website. If I didn't know how to like make something appear a certain way on the website, like I Googled like how to do the HTML. I self-taught myself Photoshop using Google and YouTube. And so I sold her thing, and that went pretty well. And it got to the point where actually it kept selling over and over and over again, to the point where she bought me out like a few years later, and she still sells it to this day. This is like 10 years later. And then I did it again with Dan Trink, Trink Fitness, who's a phenomenal trainer out in New York. And he was writing for T Nation at the time. And I'd read an article of his about arm training, about how to get bigger arms. And I said to Dan, how about I just turn this into an ebook and we sell it? He's like, all right. I was like, do you own this? Like, can you just like do whatever you want with this content, or did you like sell the rights to T Nation, right? He's like, no, I can do whatever I want. So I literally took an article that was already written, that was already published for free on T Nation, and I took the workouts. I had a designer, like a graphic designer, turn them into nice looking templates. I took his article, I basically expanded it into an ebook. It was more or less the same thing, but a very short ebook, like a training ebook. And then we just grabbed videos. I don't think we even filmed videos. Maybe Dan filmed videos. We might have just grabbed them from YouTube of like other people doing the exercises. I don't even remember how we did that. And I wrote a landing page, and then I went and did the workout and showed my results. And we sold the thing. And it sold really, really well. And then I did that once more with Girls Gone Strong, which I think I've told you about, where I was like the silent, whatever it was, 7th member of Girls Gone Strong, when they first started. So built their initial like marketing funnel and ebook and stuff like that. And then I haven't been involved with them for years and years and years and years and years. But they're doing incredible and they're awesome. Okay, so now I've got this skill set of like online marketing. What do I sell? I don't know. But the mistake that I see people make, and this is where I want to end this with before we get into the travel, before we get into how things really started to explode. The mistake that I think a lot of people make is that they decide on what product they want to sell, and then they try to find people to buy it. And I think that that's backwards. I think it's better to go out and find people that you want to serve and talk to them and figure out what they need and figure out their words for what they need. And then you go and build that. So I did 137 phone calls, 13-minute phone calls with our audience. So in 2012, I performed 137 13-minute phone calls over the course of about 2.5 months with leaders of the PTDC. I put out emails, I put out stuff. I was like, I love to talk to you. I want to hear about what your goals are in this industry. I want to hear about what your frustrations are. And if you've ever done 137 phone calls, I was doing like 8 a day, man, like 10 a day. Like, holy shit, I couldn't even think straight by the end of it. But you start to see patterns, and you start to not just see patterns in what people say, but how they say it and what's meaningful for them and the words that they use. And I documented it all on a spreadsheet. And I figured out pretty quickly the problem that trainers encounter, which is about a year into your career, almost every trainer hits the point where they think, is this what my life is going to be like? I need to figure out a way to work a little bit less with a bit better schedule for a bit better money. They're not trying to get, for the most part, they're not trying to get away from fitness, right? They entered it because it's passion-based. They don't necessarily care about getting rich or loaded. I mean, they wouldn't say no, but like their number one goal is not to get as rich as humanly possible. They want to be comfortable. It's not 6 figures, it's not 7 figures, it's whatever comfortable means to them, which is probably a little bit more than they're making right now. But more than anything else, it's the freedom. It's the freedom to work more on their schedule, less on their client's schedule, and make enough money that they can be there for their families or future families or feel like they can have families. And I resonated with this because during that whole time that I was telling you about, where I was working 10, 12-hour days and then going home and working on my computer for another couple hours, all I wanted was a girlfriend. And I had no idea how the heck I was going to be able to find one. And then I somehow found Allison. And she was just so patient. And I screwed it all up. God, I fucked it up with her. And we'll start the next episode by telling that story.
So there are 2 big things that are really big takeaways for me so far is the willingness to be uncomfortable, right? Not just in like the lack of sleep or whatever, but this is not something I know how to do, and not shying away from feeling uncomfortable in doing that thing. So whether it's interviewing people, it's uncomfortable to ask, it's uncomfortable to do, but you do it anyway. I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. So like those 2 things, the willingness and the drive to be uncomfortable and to figure it out and not rely on other people to tell you how to do it.
Love it. Okay.
That's perfect.
I'm going to recommend another episode if you're looking for something else to listen to right now. We'll be back with part 2 of this in a few days, or if you're watching this afterwards, then yeah, part 2. And part 2, I'll start with how I completely shit the bed with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and thankfully
We need the tea.
it ended up worked out. You need the what?
The tea.
We need the tea. Spill the tea.
Spill the tea.
Spill the tea. Oh shit! I'm
Gossip, John.
Oh
Gossip.
my god. Okay.
Lord.
If you're looking to listen to another episode, God, Amber, you screwed up. You screwed me up. If you're looking to listen to another episode, I'm going to recommend you check out episode 55. It is actually part 1 of a 3-part series called 22 Lessons from a $5 Million a Year Coaching Business. Episode 55, 56, and 58 are those 3. There's a part 1, 2, and 3 of these 22 lessons. Episode 55 was just Amber and I, and actually we get really much deeper into personal stuff, into why it really matters. I mean, we lead with the money of the $5 million a year, but we actually talk a lot about family. We talk a lot about choosing where you live. We talk a lot about much deeper family and lifestyle type choices. And I got more messages from this episode of people saying that it was meaningful and helpful and helped them figure out some stuff about themselves that was much deeper than coaching than I think any other episode that we've done before or after. So check that out if you're looking for something to listen to. Episode 55, 22 lessons from a $5 million a year coaching business. Alrighty then, that's all, folks.
Bye-bye.